Welcome to the Brigham Young University Family History Library webinar series. My name is Braden Knutson. I will be your host for this webinar today. We'd like to welcome everyone for our first webinar of 2017. Have a couple of poll questions here at the bottom that you guys can feel free to answer as we're going through some of our announcements. We've only got one today. Our next webinar will be next Friday, January 13th at 4 p.m. And that one will be by James Tanner as well. And so we'd like to invite everyone to join us for those for that next webinar next week, and continue to join us throughout this year. Today we'll be pleased to hear from James Tanner, who will be giving a presentation titled Why Use the FamilySearch Family Tree. James Tanner has a bachelor's degree in Spanish and a master's degree in linguistics from the University of Utah. He received a Juris Doctor degree in law at Arizona State University. He served for 2 years as an intelligence analyst for the U.S. Army and 39 years as an Arizona trial attorney. He has previously owned a retail computer business and an Apple Macintosh software company. James has over 35 years experience in genealogical research and is an avid blogger of Genealogy Star blog and Rejoice and Be Exceeding Glad. He served for 10 years as a missionary at the Mesa, Arizona Family Search Library and is currently serving at the BYU Family History Library. He has presented at expos and conferences around the U.S. and Canada. James has 7 children and 33 grandchildren. So we'll turn the timer over to James now, and as this is loading, remind you we've got a comments box up in the top right, and if you have any questions, feel free to write those in the questions box in the bottom right.
Howdy, this is James Tanner.
Oh, hold on.
Again on another BYU Family History Library webinar from the BYU Family History Library located on the Brigham Young University campus in Provo, Utah. We're going to talk today about why use the FamilySearch Family Tree. This is kind of an interesting question because there are some people who are using the FamilySearch Family Tree ask themselves this question, and then a lot of people who don't use it ask themselves this question. And it's an interesting topic to talk about, so we'll get into this. First of all, we need to understand a little bit about why we asked the question at all. The FamilySearch Family Tree is quite a unique online website. It's actually part of a larger website, FamilySearch.org, that has a lot of other resources like millions and millions of original source records, either digitized from microfilm collections or from collections of digitized records from around the world. It contains a lot of other resources, quite a few valuable resources, but sort of the main feature of the program is a huge online family tree with more than 1 billion names and increasing very, very rapidly in the number of people involved. But the questions that come up on the format. The format is that this vast program is based on a wiki program. That's a WIKI wiki, and wiki programs have some particular characteristics, including the fact that they are open and available to changes by the registered users. So in this case, if you're a registered user of the FamilySearch.org website, then you have access to make changes, add records, add sources, edit the entries of the people in the FamilySearch family tree. This is kind of in contrast to other websites like Ancestry or Find My Past or MyHeritage or whatever that also have rather large family trees, but they have collections of trees, and the individuals on those websites have basically have control over their family tree, individual family tree, and no one else can make any changes or do anything to their family tree unless they are invited or associated by a set of procedures in each of those programs. So this is quite a contrast with the others, and because it's an open source type of wiki program, this is why these questions arise about using the program and why we should use the program. So the question here I would ask back I think, to someone who asked me that question about using it is, what are you missing when you ask that question? Well, there's a lot of things out there that we need to understand about what happens to genealogy, and I would probably start at the end, and that's a good way to emphasize what happens with genealogy. A lot of us over our lifetimes accumulate a lot of records and a lot of paper and a lot of other types of things associated with our genealogy. Today we may have a variety of websites, and we may have information stored on online storage sites, and we may have information in family trees online and all sorts of other things. One of the realities of the genealogical community is that as the genealogists age and die off, there is a steady drain of all of their, not just their own individual experience, but all of their records. It's not unusual, and we've seen this happen over and over again, when a person dies who's been an avid genealogist, their heirs, their children, their grandchildren, whoever it is that inherits their things, simply has no appreciation for what it is, and it's either tossed in the local dumpster, which we've seen happen directly, or they're packed away until someone else tosses it in the dumpster, and no one really understands all of the work and all of the effort that was put into that original work that was done. Well, the FamilySearch Family Tree is intended to try to stop that. This is kind of a background issue with the family tree, but it is a real issue. And the reality of it is that the FamilySearch Family Tree is backed by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is not going to go away. And FamilySearch.org is a solely owned, FamilySearch International is a corporation that's owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormon Church. And this organization is firmly behind preserving all of those records. In fact, the Family History Library in Salt Lake City, which is known to be the largest family history library in the world, has accumulated all these records over the last approximately 150 years. And so the records that are, for example, the family group records, which I submitted over 30 years ago to the predecessors of what we have today as FamilySearch, are still being preserved. They've been kept, and I can go look at my records, and the files that I submitted 20 years ago by computer are still available on DVDs and also available online, that I can download my original file. I can still do that today. So 30 years later, I'm still able to download my file from FamilySearch. So this is kind of the core issue here. The core issue is how are you going to preserve all of this information that you've gathered? And FamilySearch has created this website, which contains, beyond just the family tree, a place called Memories, where we can store photos and text files, histories, and also documents in the form of PDF files and other types of documents, copies of documents, of the original documents that may not be otherwise available online. And all this becomes immediately available upon our death, actually, all of our own personal records, plus everything else is already available. Anything we put in this file about a dead person becomes available to anyone who wants to go in and look at the program. So this is basically a way of broadcasting all of your work in a fashion that it becomes preserved indefinitely, and it's free. That's probably the biggest thing we need to worry about, is that this isn't going to cost anybody anything. They're not going to have to, your heirs are not going to have to subscribe to a program or figure out your password or anything else. All your information is sitting out there available for anybody who wants to look at it. And so this is really a basic underlying solution to one of the biggest problems that we have in this constant loss of genealogical information through the death of the genealogist. So if we look at things this way, we begin to understand the importance of of the power of a universal, unified, networked family tree program, a program that is available to everyone, regardless. There are other large wiki programs out there. I'm not ignoring the fact that there are programs like Genie.com and WikiTree and other similar type programs that are, in a sense, universal trees. But the difference here is sort of fundamental. This is not just a program owned by a corporation that's going to keep may or may not continue to survive in the future. There are some previous iterations of online universally declared family trees that are no longer operational. They've gone out of business, as it were. And so this is not it's not impossible that this could happen. So we are, if you're aware of this, the importance of this program and this one aspect of the program, then this gives a pretty good motivation to for using the family tree. So the FamilySearch.org family tree is the one family tree that fulfills all of these different criteria for preservation and for ease of access, for being free, for having a fairly robust structure, and also for being connected to millions and millions and millions of records. So there's kind of the interesting reasons why we talk about this. So what are some of the concerns? Why would people who are actually using the family tree now be concerned about it? Well, the first one is the people complain that the family tree, people out there using the family tree is always changing my entries and my data. Well, genealogists have historically been operating very isolated. It is not unusual for a genealogist to not even have a lot of people in their own immediate family who are interested in what they're doing. I kind of put it into three categories. Your family is either completely disinterested in anything you do as a genealogist, or they're annoyed by what you do as a genealogist, or they're antagonistic against what you're doing as a genealogist. There's kind of the categories of what happens with your family members. It's very rare to have an enthusiastic member of your family who's involved directly in doing genealogical research. But this is what this has created is kind of an attitude among genealogists that they own their data, that they have become the owners of all of this massive amount of information that they've acquired. And the second part of it is they begin to believe that everything they've done is absolutely true and correct and accurate, as opposed to everything everybody else has done. And so when a change is made on a program like the family tree, where someone can come in, they're immediately upset because their data has been changed. And this is kind of the genesis of this attitude, when in fact it's possible that the changes are beneficial, that they've actually corrected information that this person, that the genealogist has acquired and improperly or inaccurately recorded or entered into the computer. The family tree has too many errors. Well, this is another issue, and this is one thing that kind of distinguishes the FamilySearch Family Tree from any of the other programs. What happened when FamilySearch began the process of creating the FamilySearch Family Tree is that they incorporated basically about 150 years worth of records into the original record set. Rather than just setting up a family tree and saying, okay, put in your information, they seeded it, in a sense, with all of the previously supplied information. So in my case, for example, many of my ancestors had submitted records to genealogical records to FamilySearch and its predecessors over many years. And in some cases, there were hundreds of different copies of the same person. Now, unfortunately, all those 800, in one case, my great-grandfather had over 820 copies of his records in the FamilySearch original database for the family tree. So what needed to be happened is those records either need to be combined into one individual or they needed to be merged into one individual. And combining preserves all the original records. Merging basically makes the merged person disappear from the record. So there's kind of two different processes there. Well, FamilySearch has used both those processes over time, and the reality of this particular aspect of the family tree was that not all of those 820 people agreed. They didn't all have the same information. Not all of them spelled his name the same way. Not all of them put in the same birth and death dates and things like that, either through error or through misinterpreting the records or whatever reasons. Uh, I can just be blunt, plain stupidity. They simply didn't all agree. Well, that's why the tree has errors, because they've incorporated all of these previously submitted records. So the process we're going through right now with the family tree is in a sense correcting those errors, entering and supporting all of the entries with source material with records that back up the information that's being put in the family tree. And I can say the tree's been up for quite a few years, and over that period of time, the accuracy and the solidification, the concrete, putting these records into concrete in a sense, has been very, very marked. In my particular lines, I don't see any changes, and I don't see too many things that I would disagree with and call errors back as far as 6 generations and even into the 7th generation. So this is the kind of thing, the format of the tree and the way it's been structured is directly has these particular issues are there. Your issues, there are changes, there are errors, but the whole idea of the family tree is that we overcome that. We get rid of the changing by supporting all of the entries with sources, and we get rid of the errors by simply correcting them. The last one is the complaint is that the family tree is not verified and not reliable. This comes from usually experience with some other family tree program, some other type of storage program. The whole essence of of the way the family tree is structured is that every fact and event that can be verified is verified and tagged or connected to a record that supports that particular conclusion. So this process has been happening very rapidly, and literally millions of source records are being added to the program just constantly. It's amazing watching the number of sources that have been added to some of the individuals in the program. Sources meaning original source records, letters, certificates, birth, death certificates, church records, census records, all of the records relied upon by genealogists to construct their family trees. So what is the family tree? So the family tree is, as I mentioned already, an accumulation of submissions from thousands of people for over 100 years. So right out of the box, when it first began, it already had a massive amount of information. And as I pointed out, a lot of that information may have been inaccurate or contradictory. And now we have an opportunity to examine all of those submissions that previously were unavailable and make the corrections and make sure that the records are more accurate. It's unified and collaborative. Now the unified nature means that everybody has access to it. The collaborative nature means that everybody's working on it on the same records at the same time. So when I'm working on a record of one of my ancestors, someone else can work on the record at exactly the same time and make changes. So in a very recent collaboration effort, I was on the phone for an hour or two with my daughter, who is one of my daughters, who is very much involved in adding records and finding genealogical information for the family tree. And we were working on the family tree together. She was in another state, and I was here in Utah, and we talked on the phone. And as I made changes, she could see the changes. And as she made changes, I could see her changes. So when she added a source, I saw the source. If she changed a birth date, I saw the change on the birth date. That's the collaborative nature of this tree. So it is just almost it's a real-time collaborative effort. Now, this is something else that comes kind of as a hard pill to swallow for traditional genealogists. They're not used to waking up in the morning and having their records change. They basically are isolated. No one else has access to it, and if they put a piece of paper down, they don't expect to have it moved. And this is not what's happening with the family tree. This is an open collaborative effort. There's benefits of this effort, and that is that just recently I was working on an individual in a parish in England, and I quit for the night on a Saturday night, and when I went back Sunday afternoon to start working on that individual again, someone had put in all the sources and added in all the dates and added marriage and all the children. It's kind of like the shoemaker and the elves. They'd done the work over the night, and I was overwhelmed. I mean, it had never been brought home to me exactly how collaborative and how immediate this program was. And I went through what had been done. It was perfectly good research, and all of the records that I would have put up were there. And I contacted the person, and we started a conversation back and forth between me, and he turned out to be in England, and I turned out to be in the United States. So it's a very interesting way of working. And underlying all this, the family tree is the solution. It's the solution to these problems that we've been facing as genealogists, whether we've ignored them or whether we face them or whether we understand them at all. We still have had problems that have accumulated over the years, and the family tree is the solution. It's not the problem. So as when we start looking at that as a solution to a lot of the issues and problems that we have with our genealogy, then we begin to understand how important this particular program is. Does it sound like I'm selling the program? Well, it's free, so you don't have to pay anything. You're not going to end up with me saying, well, and I want you to send in your money, because this isn't the way it works. I just have been doing this for such a long time and have been looking to solutions for some of these problems which I have faced. For example, as an attorney, I face the problem with probates, people dying and what to do with their property. And one of the things I've learned is that in our modern age, your kids are just as likely to come in and throw everything in your house in the garbage as anything else. There's not a whole lot of feeling for tradition and preservation among the younger people. In one case, and I just kind of digress a little bit, I was attending a conference in Florida, and sponsored by a local genealogical society, and someone walked into while we were getting ready for the meeting, walked in with a pile of boxes in their arms and basically explained that their neighbor, who was a member of the genealogical society, had died, and they were kind of gone over to the house to see what was going on, and they were the relatives of this dead person who was a member of the genealogical society, were on their way to the dumpster with all of his genealogical material, which he grabbed and convinced them that he should give to the society. So this is real. This is not a hypothetical kind of thing that I'm making up as a kind of boogeyman that I'm going to make you worry about. It really is something you need to be concerned about. So let me show you how this works. Oh, there's a question. No, the answer about living people, that's a good thing to bring up. Living people are not visible in the program. If you put in your name and you mark that you are living, no one else will be able to see you. All that comes up is the word living. It doesn't tell you any information about a living person. In fact, if you put in one of your ancestors, even if they've been dead for 500 years, and you fail to mark them as deceased, they can't be seen. Nobody will see that person until you actually mark that person as deceased, or put in a death date or whatever. So nothing living that associated with living person. Now there's one exception to that rule, and that is if you put up a photograph on the memory section of this program, and it has a living person in the photograph and a dead person, and you tag the dead person, the photograph becomes visible. So if you put up a photograph of a group of people, and some are living and some are dead, those living people would become visible. They may not be tagged or identified if you don't do that, but the photograph will become visible to anyone who goes on the program. So that's really there's a pretty absolute curtain here. It's called having your own personal space on the program, and anything you put in your personal space is not visible to anyone else working with the program. Okay, so this is a person, this person named James Turner was the person that I was researching in the family tree on that Saturday afternoon that I just spoke about. So the next day, this is what I found. I found that all the basic work and research had been done on this one person. I didn't do a thing. And he had a wife, an extra wife, and there were all the source material was attached, and all of the dates were corrected and standardized according to the standardized dates and so forth. And it was amazing because I had never seen that kind of thing. And he was not even a relative. When I contacted him, he said, "Oh no, I just enjoy going out and correcting stuff." And so he was out there and had just put all this stuff in there just to help the world, I guess, because basically, and I was the recipient of this, and I was, it was just I was very surprised. And it turned out he was someone in England who just happened to be working on the family at the same time. So if you're in any other program, okay, let's suppose that you have your individual family tree in one of the other major programs. You're basically duplicating what could be on 50 people, 100, maybe 200, maybe 1,000. How many, you don't even know how many people out there could have exactly the same information you have. If you work with those programs, and I don't want to pick on anyone in particular, but let's say you were working in Ancestry and you have your Ancestry family tree, you get record hints from Ancestry saying that you have someone else has the same person in their family tree. Well, that means that both of you have done all that work. You've done all the work of entering that person and researching that person, and someone else has done all the work of entering that person and researching that person. And so that's what we're trying to avoid with the FamilySearch family tree, because like with my example in England, I didn't have to do the work. It was done. And I could see it, and I benefited from that other person's efforts immediately. Now, what if everything they put in was wrong? Well, I could then change it. I had the ability to do the research and make whatever corrections or additions that needed to be done right at the moment. Well, what if he saw that and got upset? Then we talk to each other. What if we don't communicate well? Well, eventually somebody's going to win out. In other words, one of the ways I characterize the family tree is there's an old thing that we used to talk about in when I was a lot younger, and that's it's not a game, it's a reality, but it's called Last Man Standing. In other words, the guy that wins is the guy that's still functional at the end. It's kind of like Australian rules football. So if it's whoever can survive the game is the winner, so if you're if you get into this kind of thing, it can be rough, and that's another reason why some people feel upset with the program, because they feel like they're being involved in a battle back and forth between someone over information. But what we found here is that the answer is doing your research. It's not sitting there just changing a date back and forth, providing the backup and information and sources for that information, and then usually they back down. Is there what you might call random graffiti issues or problems with people coming into the program? Well, there's always a small amount of irrational and irresponsible types of things, but those are available everywhere. That's not going to be, uh, and you know, how do you know you're not the irrational, irresponsible person? That's the problem, I guess. And but that is only a very, very, very minor part of the whole program. Okay. If you think about though this collaborative issue of the family tree, then you begin to understand how much time and effort would be saved over the years. Um, if I had not had to spend 15 years of my life going through family group records at the Family History Library looking for what other people had done and trying to find out what had already been done by my family, then I would have had an extra 15 years to spend time researching and getting more information that was not already found. Well, the family tree is like a clearinghouse where we can put all of our information together, and then we know what's been done. And now today, if I had had the family tree back 35 years ago when I started, I could have completed that survey, that looking to see what needed to be done in a matter of minutes or days rather than 15 years of my time. So this is, this is a major issue here. So what are some of the important features? First of all, it's reliably backed, and some of this, I'm repeating some of this, is reliably backed by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Secondly, it has uniformly standardized entry formats so that we can begin to see exactly how, compare two places and know that we're talking about the same place. It's free, and it's universally accessible. So these are some of the things that we need to realize make up the basis for having and using the FamilySearch Family Tree. Now, if you have your own information on your own computer, in your own program, or on paper in your basement, or in your storage room, or in your desk, or wherever you keep it, no one else can see it. There's no way for anybody to see what you have. You may think that's a good idea, but that's the reality of it. So you may see this as an advantage, but it's really not an advantage because you're then losing all of the collaborative effort that could happen and all the time saving and all of the other information. I always ask this question of people, particularly those who have constructed what is called in genealogy a proof statement. They have created, many times they come out in journals and articles and things like that. And I don't ask the people directly this, but I've always asked myself, and I ask others when I have the opportunity, and that is, how do you know someone out there in this vast world of genealogy with all the millions and millions of people and family trees and whatever hasn't already solved this problem, hasn't got some other different conclusion than you have, and has records to support it? Well, the answer to that is you don't know that. You can't possibly know that unless you have a place where you can commonly share all of this information. I may never read your journal article. I may never know or never find the fact that you found my great-great-great-great-grandfather and proved that he was who he was. But if I put it on the family tree, or you put it on the family tree, I can look at it, and anybody in my family can look at it. Any person who is interested or related to that person has that information immediately available and immediately presented there. And any time you do have all this your own information, it really has led in the past and really will lead in the future to a massive duplication of effort. Okay, so it helps to know why how and why the family search works, so you can basically start using it and not worrying about it. So where do you start? The answer is you start by entering your information directly into the family tree. What's surprising to a lot of people is that they get into the family tree and they find out that after, for instance, they put their name in, they put the parents' names in, and all of a sudden the program starts asking them if this is the same person. And they go, yeah, but how did that person get into the family tree? I didn't put them there. And basically the question's being asked by people who aren't even aware that they have relatives, much less that they might be working in the family tree. An extreme example of this was the other day when I was helping a lady that I know work on who was from Vietnam. She was actually a refugee who left during the Vietnam War and moved to Cambodia and eventually ended up in the United States. Well, she was interested in preserving her family and her family information, and I said, well, let's start with the FamilySearch Family Tree. She put in some very basic information that she knew herself, and then when I met with her a second time, she put in more information. She had entered more information which she had gotten from an uncle. When we got into the family tree, there was more information than she had entered in the meanwhile. And she was saying, well, where did all this come from? And it turned out that one of her cousins that she was entirely unaware of was working on the family tree and had more records than she had about her family and had entered that additional information into the family tree. This is how you start. You start working, and then as you work on it, you will probably find that there are others who are in your family who are working on the same entries, and your information becomes, in a sense, magnified, expanded by the efforts. So I would suggest, though, that you start by learning about the program while you start working with the program, because immediately you're going to get some suggestions. One of the things, for example, is putting in a date. If you put your name in, or the name of you or your relatives into the program, and then you put in the date, the program itself is going to come up and ask you to enter a standardized date. Well, you may not understand what that means, so it's important to start learning about the program as you start working with the program. There is a place to start to learn about the program. There is a program, another website, another free website that has been developed called the Family History Guide, and this particular family history program is a structured, sequenced approach to teaching family history, and specifically part of the program, part of the website is directed at the FamilySearch Family Tree. We have other videos in the in the BYU Family History Library on the YouTube channel that specifically talk about the Family History Guide, and so if you need some explanations or information about the Family History Guide, then there's plenty of other information out there available. As a matter of fact, the Family History Guide teaches you how to use the Family History Guide in addition to how to do genealogy. So if you just go there and click on that big black button on the screen, it's for the introduction to the program, and then you'll start getting videos and handouts and all sorts of things that will help you understand not only how to do genealogy, but how to work with the Family History Guide. And the program is called the Family History Guide, and the address of the program is thefhguide.com. For those of you who are familiar with Family Search, you'll understand that this is a Family Search certified program. That means that it's certified to work with Family Search. And further, for those of you who may be more familiar with Family Search, the Family History Guide is also been linked directly from LDS.org, which is the Church Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints main website. So there's no question that this is an accepted way of approaching family history by those who are very much involved in that process. So how do we use the family tree to find our ancestors and relatives? If you're working all by yourself and you're not using the family tree, how do you know someone else does not already have the information you need? That's just kind of the bottom line question that I've been addressing through the beginning, through this particular presentation. And once you ask yourself that question, then you need to go out and see who else. Now, traditionally, what we've been told in genealogical methodology is that we have the thing called the research cycle, We determine what we need to know, what we know now about our family. Then we go to asking questions about how we're going to find additional information. We look for sources and things like that. There's this research cycle. Um, and as I pointed out, I spend a great deal of time doing just that. But the family tree, in a sense, shortcuts all that, because by going to the family tree, you already know if anybody has information about your family, at least among those who are on the FamilySearch Family Tree. So that's sort of the shortcut way of getting around that particular problem. So now you get started. You actually log in to view the family tree. You're going to be asked to register, and that information is not going to be shared. You're not going to start getting advertisements from Amazon or anything because you registered for the family tree. And once you have your login and your password, then you can get into the program itself. Now, one thing you will need to have in order to function on the family tree is an email address. The family tree and many of the other programs that are associated with it are keyed into your email. That's how they identify you. In a sense, changing an email address has become almost more difficult than physically moving from place to place. I'm still having to use an email address that I abandoned almost probably about 8 years ago. And the reason I'm having to use it is because that was used as my ID for entering into certain websites. So I'm still typing in my old email address, even though I don't even have email and don't receive email from that email address. So it's kind of interesting. You log in up here where it says sign in. And if you need to, there's a button next to that says free account. That you can register to get into the program. Now, you can get into FamilySearch.org and use most of the resources on the FamilySearch.org program without registering, but you do need to be registered in order to get into the FamilySearch Family Tree. And this is important. Remember your login and your password. This is probably the most constantly background issue that I have to deal with people is sitting down and saying, well, they say, I need some help with FamilySearch, and you go, okay, fine. And so we sit down, and the first thing I do is I say, log in and put in your password, and they go, uh-oh, I think I forgot it. Anyway, there is a process for recovering your login and your password. Just remember that it's a lot easier to remember it and write it down or have it in reference someplace than it is to try to get it back once you've lost it. And it also helps to know how the family tree works and what we need to do. Right here we have a copy of a little card entry for an individual, summary of an individual family. Happens to be my grandfather. And this is a basic kind of outline information. One thing you will see on this view is a number. The number doesn't look like a number. It looks like a bunch of letters, but it's actually a computer number. And each of those numbers, that KWZW-JRZ for Leroy Parkinson Tanner, is a unique number for that individual. So how do you know if there are duplicates, individuals in the program? If I find someone else who is the same person as Leroy Parkinson Tanner with the same birth date and all the same information, then I can say, yeah, this is the same person. I know they're different people in the program if they have a different ID number. So by looking at the ID numbers, I can tell if I have a duplicate entry. If I actually found somebody who had the same name and similar birth dates and everything, I have to be real careful that I don't think that it's the same person, even though they may have the same name. So there's, it's the same kinds of things that we do constantly as genealogists in doing research, trying to find entries. So what we try to do here is to start by checking and verifying all of the entries in the program. That means beginning with yourself. I don't recommend spending a whole lot of time putting information in the program about living people. You're not going to be able to, only you are going to be able to see it. No one else will see it. There's no reason to put in your spouse or your a living spouse. If they're living, if they're deceased, that's different. Your living spouse or your living children or grandchildren or whoever, those people, if they want to be in the program, they'll be there and they'll have their own private space. But if you just start with yourself and your parents, if your parents are living, you're going to have to put you're going to have to enter your parents' information into the program in order to see any of your grandparents. If your grandparents are living, then you're going to have to enter their information in to see their parents. Once you get back to the first dead people, then it's kind of opens up the program. And yes, when you put in your living parents and your living grandparents, then those people who are living are not visible by anyone else except you. But let's suppose one of them dies. Uh, Terrible, but might happen. And when they die and the death date is put in, then any information that's already been entered about that person by anyone will appear in the program. And yes, there could be then duplicates. So there is this kind of background issue that all the people as they die off and have been already entered in the program as living may end up with multiple copies of their people. And this has already happened in a number of family cases, in my own family and with others, and there is some effort has to be made to remove all the duplicates, merge the duplicates of all the various records that have been created. The program facilitates this, by the way, because it'll keep telling you there are duplicates. So you start with you, your parents, your grandparents, and then something very interesting will happen. Your idea here is to create an unbroken solid line of connection supported by sources going back in your pedigree. But FamilySearch, like some of the other major online genealogy programs like MyHeritage and Find My Past and Ancestry, have now started making record hints. In other words, they're using the records that they have in their database with very sophisticated computer searches, and they're suggesting records that may be your person. And they're doing this at a very, very high accuracy rate. So as you begin to enter people into the computer, you may automatically get these record hints. Now, your job is to review the record hint and make sure it applies to your person. You have to be careful with this because people have similar names and all other things. But if it's your person, then you can add that record hint and the information contained in it, and thereby help to build your family tree. And all I can say with my use of the record hints in all of these programs is that they are a fantastic time saver. They are preventing me from spending hours looking up routine records like census records and birth and death records that I would otherwise spend hours looking for. They're just popping up with record hints. And FamilySearch is doing a very, very admirable job of providing record hints, at least back for about the last 250 years. One thing you want to avoid when you get started with the FamilySearch Family Tree, and actually in any genealogical situation, research situation, is avoid the temptation, I would say, to jump back to the end of the line and start doing research. In other words, assume all those people in between you and the last guy out there are all accurate and start trying to find this person. Well, first of all, if it's on the FamilySearch Family Tree, the reason why there's no information out there is because after 150 years, nobody's been able to find the guy or the person. Okay, so what makes you think when you're just starting out as a genealogist and you have very little experience that you're going to be able to do something that these people haven't done for like 100 years? Well, that's just one problem. The other problem is that you're acting in a sense on a basis of putting faith in all the accuracy between that person and yourself that may or may not exist. So good idea, especially with the FamilySearch Family Tree, is to review and see whether or not the information has been sourced, whether people have listed sources, and then more importantly, whether the sources that they've listed actually support the information that they've entered for that person. Now, it's not unusual for me to find somebody who has put a source of a birth date in for an individual hasn't bothered to copy and correct the birth date that's recorded as the details for that person. So it really is, there's kind of a process here that we need to go through in kind of proofreading and verifying and helping this information to be more accurate before we jump out and start getting in the end. And I guess you have to realize, well, I mean, this is something you'd understand only if you were a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if you're a Mormon. But yesterday, when I brought up this subject in a class that I was teaching about the family tree having problems, and those red markers that you're seeing on there are called data problems by FamilySearch, and they're out there identifying them. There are things like baby born after the mother died, baby born before the parents were old enough to have children, things like this. But somebody yesterday in one of my classes raised their hand and said, well, I thought this was the church. And I said, well, yeah, but it's family history. And they said, well, I thought somebody went through and corrected it all. And my answer is, yeah, you. You are the one that is going through and correcting it all, not somebody else out there. No, it's not necessarily correct simply because it's in here in the family tree. So here's one, for example, person over 120 years old. The death year is over 120 years after the birth year. Well, I would suggest that you either want to investigate to see whether you really do have a very famous ancestor in the fact that they lived longer than most people or almost anyone in the earth, or I would also suggest that this might be, you might have a problem here with the dates being wrong. And the other part of this that's important is that some of these errors might not be so obvious. In this case, we have a person by the name of Raleigh Morgan, and he's supposedly born in 1755 in a place called Shepherdstown, Berkeley, Virginia, in the United States of America. He dies in 1824 in Bedford Springs, Bedford, Pennsylvania, in the United States. Okay, so first of all, what we have to do is this looks like fine. He has two sources, one discussion, which is a holdover from years past, and zero memories, which means nobody's put in his photograph, which of course doesn't exist. So be careful if you see a photograph that was made before 1735, or 1835 or so, because they didn't have photography before 1838 was actually the number, the date around that period of time when it became available. But in this particular case, the error is a little bit less obvious. And the first part of the error is that Shepherdstown was not chartered until 1762. So he could not have been born there in 1755. There was no Shepherdstown. It was forest out in the wilderness. There was nothing there. Well, okay, let's say there's an exception in case this person just happened to be an American, Native American, or an Indian, and was born out there in the forest. Well, that's probably not the case. And in any event, his birth was probably not recorded. So here's Shepherdstown. Secondly, Berkeley County, Virginia, was not created until 1772. So it couldn't have been Shepherdstown, Berkeley, Virginia. And the argument some people make is, well, that was the location where the event happened. That's what it is today. And my answer is no, because if you know any history at all, you know that this particular area wasn't settled. Nobody lived there before that period of time. That's the reason why I took this particular example. Now, this is the kind of thing you have to correct, because this person was obviously not born in Shepherdstown, may not have been born in 1755. We may not even have the right person here. So we need to go into this and do some research. This is the bottom line. Unless you check carefully through the family tree, you may not be related to the last person in any family line. Now, this is the case if you have copied your family tree from someone else. So if you got a GEDCOM file, which is genealogical data communications file created by a program like Personal Ancestral File. If you got a file, a computer file, or you got inherited a big stack of family group records from an ancestor, you have the same problem. You have no idea, unless they have carefully documented and sourced each of their conclusions, you have no idea if that information is correct. And this is what I was confronted with back in examining paper family group records back from 1982 through for the next 15 years or so of time that it took me to get through all my ancestors. To give you some perspective as to why that took me 15 years, it was not because I wasn't diligently doing the work. It's because, for example, today on MyHeritage has found 100,000 common ancestors that I have with other family trees on their program. My particular family lines go back, in some cases went back 19 generations, most of which was totally made up and unfounded, but that was another story. That was part of the problem of what I was confronted with in spending 15 years looking, was trying to figure out if the next family group record I found was actually correct or not. And how you add information is by going out and using these record hints that come up, but also by finding sources, finding information in original source records, and adding that information to the family tree. By doing that, you will automatically find and add additional people to the family tree. For example, simple example, if I go back to my grandfather, Leroy Parkinson Tanner, and I find him in a census record as a child, then I now have his brothers and sisters and his parents' names and their approximate birth dates and where they were living, and in most cases where they reported that they were born. Now, all of those things might not be correct, but at least I have a starting point for adding information and putting in the census record as the source. Now, what if I find a birth record for Leroy Tanner that says he was born someplace else? Then I'm going to have to make a decision. That's kind of the basic function of genealogy, is examining a number of historical source records and determining evaluating which of those are correct. So anything you do on the family tree involves this process of evaluation. So you use the information in the sources to add or correct the entries, and also to add people to the program. And as you work your way back, this can happen very quickly, by the way. The record hints come in almost as quickly as you add people to the program. So you can be adding people and find record hints that will add more information and more people, and it can progress pretty rapidly until you get back to the point where it becomes a little more difficult and the record hints stop appearing. There are also a whole bunch of support programs out there because of the prominence of FamilySearch, and because so many people use the program. There have been a lot of programs written that work in conjunction with or reinforce the information that's in the FamilySearch.org family tree. They have on the FamilySearch.org website, it's kind of hidden, but it's way down at the bottom of the page, on the startup page. If you go way down to the bottom of the page, you'll see a connection to the app gallery. And presently there are about a little over 100 apps out there. For example, here's one called Find a Record. And this program, and I won't go into any detail about it, but we have other presentations that talk about this program. But this particular program goes through the family tree for you and finds all of the problems, all of the things that need to be corrected, all the places where information is missing, and all of the contradictory things in the family tree. So these are kind of very, very valuable programs. And as I mentioned, the FamilySearch Family Tree automatically adds record hints, so that helps to facilitate you're finding people. Here, in this case, those blue icons over on the right-hand side of John Waldo Morgan's detail page here are record hints. Now, they show 3 record hints. If you add a record hint and there are still 3 record hints, that means they have more than 3, and it will just keep there until you run out of the stack. So they're only showing the first 3 on the stack, and so there might be a whole lot there. And as you keep adding record hints, I've had that happen for like an hour or two. I've just kept adding record hints, and there were just more, and there were more, and there were more. Finally ended up with like 20 or 30 record hints, and then they finally disappeared. So they finally ran out of records to provide. The most important factor, however, is to evaluate all these record hints to make sure they apply to your relatives. So as we added this as one, for example, this one was a Social Security Death Index record. So I had to determine whether this was my person, and I decided it was and added that record hint. And in addition to that, we have a section called Memories in the FamilySearch.org website. These are additional documents, photographs, stories in the form of text files, and even audio files that talk about the person. So the more memories and sources that a person is you're able to find about someone, then that equals and increases the reliability of the program. So here's a screenshot of the memories section showing some stories, some documents, a photograph of a grave marker, and all sorts of other information that you can add and other people add, and that becomes cumulative. And each of these can be tagged or attached to a person in the family tree or multiple people in the family tree, and so they become referenced to that particular person. So the memories add a depth. This is one of my great-grandmother's great-great-grandmother, Margaret Jarvis, and some of the memories that have been acted, photographs, stories, maps, all sorts of things about her life that add depth to the information about each individual in the family tree. And I just mentioned this as kind of a side note that adding depth to each of the individuals discourages random changes. And in other words, the more memories there are, the more sources there are, it is far, far less likely that anybody's going to make any changes to that person. So it's usually the changes are occurring because the individual has no sources attached. And now there's disagreement over which of the John Smiths is actually your John Smith, or Jose Gomez, or whatever the other common names might be out there. Important note here, and I'm going into this in another presentation in more depth, but changes are really an invitation to collaboration. So when somebody makes a change, how you get notified of those changes is you watch. There's a link, a button on each individual where you can watch that individual. If you watch an individual, then FamilySearch will send you a link, a list every week of all of the changes made to all your watched individuals. You can watch up to 2,000 people or so. And so you could really get a lot of information about what other people are doing. But this list is something that I go through it every week and make sure that I understand what changes have been made. Either I care or I don't care, and they're either supportive or not. So I have to understand, though, that it is the nature of the family tree to change. When you talk about it changing, yeah, that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to keep changing. And the nature of wikis is that they change. As they change, they become more accurate. And that's exactly what's happening with the family tree. So changes are a sign of a healthy family tree. If changes stop happening, the family tree dies. But it's not likely to happen with all the millions of people involved. So you can see every change and contact the person who made the change if you need to do that. So this is one way of not only collaborating, but also helping the tree to remain its own, to have integrity and be correct. So here's The person who, when I wrote, I got this notice and I could send in a message directly if I clicked on that person's name for making the change. In this case, I clicked on one of my own changes just for an example, and I blurred out all of the information, and then I said send a message. I could either use the email address for that person, or if I wish to do so and there was no email address, I can send a message through the link at the bottom of this little screen that directly goes through the program and notifies the person. So here's my send a message directly. So why should you use the family tree? Avoid duplication, enhance your research with record hints, share with all of your relatives, verify and document the sources for the entire human family, and use the other resources of the website. These are all reasons to use the family tree. So thanks for watching and listening today. Oh, a couple of questions here. What's this question? Can we download our GEDCOM file into FamilySearch Family Tree? That would probably be about the worst thing you could think I can think of that I would expect anybody to do. The tree is not, the answer to the question technically is yes. There is a pathway by which you could actually do that, but I would make some very extensive efforts. And here's what happens when you try to do that, even if you follow the instructions, which I, by the way, have strategically avoided talking about because of that very fact that the problem is most people feel like they need to start with all of their information, and the answer is when they get into the family tree, they may very well find out it's already all there, which means that your GEDCOM file is going to end up being a duplicate, which means you get even more work because you're going to have to merge all those duplicates you just created, or someone will. But the process of uploading a GEDCOM includes a process where you have to individually look at and verify every person who's found to be a duplicate in the program. So it's not going to save you a whole lot of time. Let's just say it that way. It's the process has been designed to protect the uploading of GEDCOM files, which was one of the reasons why the original files were involved so many duplicates. Okay, so that's kind of a roundabout way of answering the question. The next question was, what will protect your memories that you've entered after you die? If you put in memories about yourself, first of all, memories are not as private as the information that's contained in the family tree itself. And as I mentioned earlier, a memory that contains a dead person becomes visible. And so if you put in a photograph of your living grandmother and she then dies and you enter her death date, then that photograph immediately becomes potentially visible. But in order for a memory to be visible so globally, the memories have to be tagged to an individual. So let me run through the process real quick. Let's say I upload a photograph of my great-grandmother who is deceased. That photograph is then up there on FamilySearch in the memory section until I tag it, and that is attach it in a sense, link it to the person that is in the photograph or the people in the photograph to the family tree. Nobody can see it except me. Once I tag it, then everybody can see it, including, by the way, Google. Memories are searchable by Google. So this is an advantage and a disadvantage, but it's something we need to bear in mind when we're working with living people. If you put in your information, let's say you put in all your information about yourself, your information would not be visible until you died and somebody entered that, your death date in, and then merged all of your copies or whatever. And then all your information would then become visible. So that's the way it works, and I would expect over time that may change a little. Well, you can. The question is, yeah, it makes sense to put in information about living people, but if you're concerned with entering living people, what I would suggest you do is either get them all to enter their own information into the family tree, which is one way of handling it, or put your information about living people into a separate program. There are other programs that connect directly with the family tree. Ancestry, by the way, is one. Ancestry's family trees connect. You can transfer information back and forth. The limitation there is you actually have to have an LDS account, be a member of the LDS Church, have an LDS account to do that. But programs like Roots Magic and Ancestral Quest, which are individual programs, are your program. You keep your information, it's private, but then the information can be moved directly into the FamilySearch Family Tree, and they operate whether or not you are or not a member of the church. Doesn't matter. You just, as long as you have a FamilySearch account. Okay, I hope that helps. Any other questions out there? Okay, well, thanks a lot. Remind everyone that these webinars are recorded and available for view on the BYU Family History Library YouTube channel. And we would encourage you to subscribe to the channel so that you get notification of new videos as they're uploaded. We have quite a few planned this month, and we'll probably have a couple of hundred during this year. Thanks.
Great, thanks, James. There is one more question here. It's what if someone later wants to remove a story, photo, etc. you have entered?
You can remove all of your own stories and photos. If you have it on there, you can take it off. If someone else puts it on there in the memory section, then presently there is no editing capability. What they have is theirs and what you have is yours, and you can't go, you can't edit it. But you can communicate directly with the person through the FamilySearch program, or you can send them an email if they have an email address and ask them to take it down if there's a reason to have it taken down. If it's something that is copyrighted or violates one of the use terms of the FamilySearch website, then you can complain to FamilySearch and they'll take it down. So there's ways to get rid of the stuff, but basically you have your own editing capability over your own content.
Okay, well, thank you very much, James, for the wonderful webinar. We appreciate everyone for joining us today. If you didn't get a chance at the beginning to answer a couple of our polls, we'd like to invite you to do that now. And also, if you have any feedback for today's webinar, we'd love to hear from you, and so we can make our presentations a little bit better. This webinar has been recorded and we'll post it onto our YouTube channel later this week. And if you'd like to subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can receive notifications of when those videos are uploaded and stay up to date on what's new. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.